and we invited two special guests for that, Petru and Theo. They will introduce themselves, obviously, but just to introduce the topic a little bit more, we, as the campus organization, have seen in recent years that a lot of companies that are active on this campus, they find interesting new spaces, they find interesting new experiments, they build new innovations. But what then? And then comes how to create a kind of culture to really adopt those innovations. How do you bring those innovations from the innovation department to the daily business? How can you go about the knowledge loss that in some sectors are prevalent with aging people? How do you create this innovation culture to really be creative and innovative and stay competitive on the long term? That is a topic that is coming up more and more and more, these questions about that. And together with Petru Curșeu and Theo van Kessel, we have been discussing how to spark some knowledge on this to our ecosystem. And today is the first event on this topic. This will be a series. And for starters, we asked Petru to share, this knowledge on literature that he can find, and everything a little bit more from an academic point of view. And we asked Theo van Kessel, managing director for APG, or of the new business development of APG, to reflect on that from a business point of view, to really make that connection between academic literature and the really practical business perspective. You're very much welcome to also interact and ask your questions, etc. We have ample time, especially at the end, to do Q&As and get into the discussion. During the presentations, you're also very much welcome to put already your opinions, your questions, your remarks in the chat. We have Ida Weber, a colleague, who's moderating that a little bit and make sure that as much as possible your questions will be answered in the end. But like I said, if some questions cannot be answered in this session, this is only the start of a series, so we'll use that in defining the scope for the next session that will be on June 3rd. So if you're interested in this topic, please already make a mental note or note in your agenda that June 3rd will be the next one, where we will again dive into this topic. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to Petru, who's professor of the organizational behavior at the Open University of the Netherlands, and his research interests include team dynamics, social cognition, multi-party collaboration, as well as decision making in organizations. And we thought he would be the perfect person to reflect on the topic of cultivating innovation mindsets. Petru, I'm really looking forward to your talk. And like I said, after the talk of Petru, we'll go to Theo van Kessel, who will reflect from a business point of view, and then we will go into Q&A. Lots of fun and great insights from Petru. Petru, to you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Indeed, I hope you can see the slides. I have prepared a number of slides for today. As Peter mentioned, I'm professor of organizational behavior, and I currently coordinate a multidisciplinary research program within the Open Universiteit. And at the same time, in that particular multidisciplinary program, we have a presence in the Brightlands campus trying to contribute to this debate and conversation around innovation in the campus. Everybody's talking about innovation at the campus, so it's no surprise that we were trying to understand a little bit what does it mean to innovate, and we ended up in these debates on the notion of mindsets, things that we might take for granted, and then we discussed that we might want to organize a dialogue that will bring, on the one hand, the scientific insights that we have on innovation at the table, and on the other hand, bring some practical experiences, some challenges, some personal issues that people encounter with in interacting with innovation, and try to spark that dialogue that might help us all understand in a better fashion what innovation mindsets are, and how innovation can actually be nourished in organizational settings. So the plan for today is to start with a very short presentation on what we know from science. And the structure of that presentation goes around the idea of the innovation mindsets, and followed by a short definition of what innovation and creativity means from a scientific perspective. And now I will try to summarize in a multi-layered and meta-analytic perspective what we know the drivers of innovation are at the individual, team, and organizational level. And then we will embark on a discussion, having Theo here take the lead and share his insights from a lifelong experience in innovation in organizations. So let me start by a short reflection on why innovation mindset. And if you search the web, this is one of the ways in which people actually depicted mindsets in innovation mindset, that explosion of ideas and diversity and complexity and interconnectedness, and so this is what the graphical depiction of innovation mindset looks like, and then probably in practice is pretty much the same. It's pretty much in a similar fashion, interconnected factors at the individual level, at the organizational level, at the team level. But the trouble with this interconnectedness is that it generates that global perspective, and we talk about it as we all know and we all agree what innovation is, and most certainly in the context of the Brightlands campus, the discourse around innovation is present there every day. Everyone is busy with innovation one way or another, either studying or working with innovation and trying to catch up with innovation. So innovation is a part of the common discourse around the campus. And then talking to Peter, we asked ourselves, do we really understand what it takes to innovate? I mean, we know from a scientific perspective that organizations are struggling with innovation, struggling to kind of keep up or catch up with innovation, are struggling to implement things and to make that transition between having a creative idea to implementing it. And because of these challenges, we tried to organize this exchange, and we hope you will be willing to share your ideas on what we bring to the table today. So let me start first by just defining the concept. We have to clarify our concepts before we move on with a debate on what they mean and how they can be stimulated. So creativity in principle refers to all the processes, the outcomes, the products that lead to novelty, to changing things, to improving things, and that change can be radical, shifting completely our way of doing things, or inventing completely new products, or it can be incremental. So we refine the process a little bit, we improve the products or the services a little bit, and that's also innovation. So we talk about the creativity and innovation on a continuum from incremental, in small steps, to radical in big disruptive way of doing things, or making things. And innovation in itself kind of covers the whole process, from creating novelty to implementing novelty and cashing in on novelty, actually. So this would be the distinction that I would like to make at this point. So creativity would be that process of generating novel, useful, and feasible ideas, while innovation incorporates creativity as part of the process, but it moves on to trying to apply, make use of, and implement changes. So that's a very quickly the idea of innovation. Now, in my talk, I would like to explore the drivers, the antecedents of innovation on 3 levels. First of all, I want to talk about what drives individual innovation. What makes people innovative? The individual employees. And then move up a little bit in the level of analysis and try to talk a little bit about the factors that determine innovation in groups, in teams, and then talk about drivers of innovation at the organizational level. Now, I will focus my presentation on insights that we have from science, and not any empirical evidence, but for the talk today, I tried to gather data from the most comprehensive studies on innovation, and these are the meta-analytical studies on innovation. And these meta-analytical studies, just for clarification, are summaries of tens of empirical, independent empirical studies that were done in the literature. So if I will talk, for example, about diversity and innovation, I will talk about maybe 10, 20, 40 studies that have explored that association, and I will talk about the overall relationship between the 2 factors. So I will try to squeeze in 30 minutes the most comprehensive studies that you can find in science. Now, the reason for doing that is because in those studies you can find the trends across the different organizations, across different types of teams and settings. So bear with me. You will see lots of numbers. You will see as you see here on the bottom side of the slides. I always have the sources that I use. Most of these sources are open access sources, so you can download them from the internet. So you can also check what I mention or state. So let me start with the first question. What drives individual innovation? And here I summarized a meta-analysis of more than 106 studies, and this analysis integrates more than 28,400 employees. So we are not talking about a single organization. We are not talking about a single team or 100 employees. No, it's really a huge sample. So across all these 106 studies, the general observation is that the most important predictor of innovative behavior in individuals is actually the proactive personality. So it is in the personality of these individuals whether they will innovate or not at the workplace, and they will be open to kind of embrace change and embark on change. And then proactive personality was defined as this tendency to constantly check for opportunities, to fight with obstacles, and to work your way through all the challenges that you're facing, and be proactive about things. So this is a very important predictor of innovation. And then we have the other 2 predictors, which is openness to experience, that reflects your tendency of experimenting things and trying new experiences, and on the other hand, extraversion. So these 2 personality predictors are very strong drivers of change-oriented behavior of innovation at work. Now, the trouble with these factors is that personality very often is not open to change, because from a managerial perspective, you could ask yourself, well, if I see these results, of course, I want to know how I can make someone more proactive as a personality, or more open to experience, and more extrovert. But of course, from your own experience maybe, and from the experience that you have with others, that you cannot simply transform an introvert, a person that is oriented towards his or her inner life, and you cannot simply shift that person and make it an extrovert. That's just not possible. So then let's look a little bit more, because if personality is the only predictor of innovation, that we have little hope in changing things. Now, another study that included again 80 different empirical samples supports the same relationship of openness to experience. So really, this is a systematic predictor of innovative performance of the individuals. But then you have something that can be changed. It's education and creativity and job-related self-efficacy. These are things that are open to change. Not truly intrinsic motivation, which is still a trait, a particular attribute that people have, the idea of being driven from your inner logic, from your inner drive, not expecting others to tell you, well, you should innovate, you should engage on that, you should do your task. No, it's your inner drive to engage with work. Now, very important education. These are things that we can certainly work with, and certainly we can also work with the creative and job self-efficacy. In particular, the strongest predictor here is the creative self-efficacy. What does that mean? That means that in general, individuals who really believe they can be innovative, they actually are. So this sense of confidence in what you can do can be nourished in your organizational settings by creating these contexts that are conducive for innovative performance and giving rewards for that innovative performance. And I'll come back to that element in a bit. Now, moving on to things that we might influence. A very influential study that was published in 2012 with more than 1,400 employees. Again, this is a meta-analytic study. Shows that two motivational forces are at play when we talk about innovative work performance, and this motivational focus distinguishes between two forces. First of all, the promotion focus includes a set of forces that make people act because they want to grow, because they want to achieve, because they want to do things with their lives, because they want to seize any possible option and opportunity that is out there and make the best of it. So that is the proactive orientation in motivation. And then, of course, you can see in maybe in your own experience, but also in organizational life, that some people are not driven by this proactive, promotive, promotion focus, but they are driven by a prevention focus. They want to be safe. They want to preserve the status quo. They want to protect the security of their job. They want to look for safety and avoid mistakes at any costs. Now, these two profiles, I will not get into details, but these two profiles were validated starting with the 1990s repeatedly in the empirical evidence, and it really empirical studies really support this dual focus in for the individual employees. Now, the thing is, to some extent, the tendency to be promotion oriented is a trait. So you have a tendency of behaving either in a promotion focus or a prevention focus, and that to that extent that is linked to your personality structure, to your individuality in a sense. But the research also shows that this motivational orientation can be changed. And here we have our first set of indicators of things that we might change in our employees. So that's if personality we cannot change, motivation and this focus on promotion or prevention we can really influence. And it's quite important to understand the way in which and the factors that can help us to shift that focus, to make it from a prevention, from a situation in which you avoid making mistakes and you are withdrawn and just protect your job, into being proactive, seeking opportunities. And here I think the best illustration is Elon Musk's remark that in the companies that he's heading, that are all kind of oriented towards radical innovation, they focus on rewarding innovation even if people make mistakes. That's not really a trouble. That's not a problem. That comes with the job. That comes with the task of innovating, and actually a prevention focus, in his terms, the failure to try to innovate for the sake of avoiding mistakes, that's penalized. I will come back to that remark in a bit. So let's now move into higher order factors. So if for example we now agree that personality, we cannot do much with it, you cannot change it, but of course you can always select creative individuals to be involved in innovative tasks. Well, motivation and this focus on promotion motivators can be changed, and I will move into the debate on what factors in a team can help us create this promotion focus. And I would like to emphasize a little bit why team innovation is important, especially because what you have in the literature, and here you have a study that was published in Science showing that as we move on in time, the incidence of team innovations increases substantially. So we are not innovating as individuals anymore. We are not submitting patents in red here as individuals, but in teams, and these teams are larger and larger. So if there is a driver of innovation in the organizations, in society as a whole, that driver is the team. So it's or the engine of the innovation. So we have to understand what happens in these teams that drives innovation. And here is one integrative set of factors that drive innovation in these engines, in these teams. First of all, you have to look at what you put in the team, at the input. And most researchers will claim that you have to select creative individuals. In order to foster innovation, you have to select creative individuals. You have to also make sure that you have the diversity that you need. Why? Because this diversity that you put in the team then generates this constructive conflict, the dissent that eventually leads to innovation. The task has to be motivating, to push people to be inherently driven to innovate. It should have a little bit of pressure to it, in order to steer that need to innovate and need to grow. And of course, in terms of processes, you have to focus on rules for innovation. You have to set those rules that innovation is valued. You have to create those expectations of the roles that actually you expect people to behave in an innovative way. All those expectations will put people in this promotion mindset, right? So the processes that you set up in teams, the norms, the reflexivity, the constructive conflict, all those things are important elements that will shift from a prevention to a promotion focus mindset. And in the organization as a whole, you certainly need a reward structure that really supports innovation. You cannot really talk about, preach about innovation and not supporting it, or not offering a innovative, supportive climate. Now, all these factors will shift that mindset from prevention to promotion. And what we know from meta-analysis is that actually this works. If you look at the process, the most important predictor in terms of processes for innovation in teams is the innovative vision. You need that vision in order to innovate, right? You need the support for innovation. You need good external communication and internal communication in the team. And of course, you need the psychological safety, and I'll come back to the psychological safety in a bit. What is very important to mention, though, here is that job-related diversity, so that diversity that you have to put in a team in order to make it innovative, that's very important. But at the same time, if you put in diversity that is not related to the job, that has a negative effect. So you have to, when you make up your team, indeed you have to select creative individuals and to make sure that you have the diversity that's needed, but also to avoid putting it too much diversity in that group. Now, what is psychological safety? So that psychological safety would be that context in which people feel safe to take risks, and I'll go back to that remark that Musk was making about allowing for that safety, that you can be wrong, and while you try to innovate, you can be wrong, and that's what we call psychological safety, and that's one of the important drivers of creativity at the group level, especially. But what creates that psychological safety? Well, a creative role clarity, for example, it should be clear that you expect from those people to be creative. A peer support. So it's not enough to have a single individual that is creative. You need a support structure around that individual. You need a supportive organizational context, and also a very good relationships with the leader, a trusting leader, and not lastly, the work autonomy. So all these ingredients are needed to kind of help people shift that mindset from preventive to promotion focused in teams. Let's move to the last level of analysis and see what we know about organizational innovation, the highest level. Well, what we know so far is that typically large organizations innovate more than small organizations. That's not surprising. The relationship between size and innovation efforts is bigger in service than in manufacturing industry. But behind size, behind organizational size, you can have many factors. So let's keep that for a while, because that's not maybe that relevant, and focus on other drivers. And here is one of the most influential meta-analysis that included somewhere around 1,500 companies in total, that shows that actually innovative companies have a high administrative intensity. So you need administrative support in order to be innovative. You need to specialize. Of course, as a company, you need to be highly differentiated. But of course, here the differentiation can bring a risk, because if you move into unrelated diversification, that can be a risk factor for your innovative performance after all. So I would like to conclude that discussion with the resources, because what we also see in the campus, it's oftentimes a desire of the organizations to innovate, but actually a lack of resources to do so. So in this meta-analytic study on innovation, it's pretty clear that lack resources is one of the core drivers for innovative performance. Now let's try to put things together in moving from team level, organizational level towards individual mindsets. So if you look at the organizational context and the innovative performance, what you get is that job autonomy, creative role expectations, and the climate for innovation and the good relationship with the leader are the most important predictors of this innovative work performance. So in a sense, you can design your work environment, you can design your job structure in such a way in which you bring in autonomy, you create complexity and challenging tasks for these employees, and eventually that will generate an orientation towards being innovative, being proactive. Now, let me integrate everything, and I would like to approach the concluding section here. I wanted to depict with numbers that we get from science, from studies, what do we have in a multi-layered perspective, meta-analytic perspective on innovation. So we concluded that at the individual level, the most predictive factors to date are personality and motivation. Personality, you cannot do much with it, but I mean, you can do in terms of selection. You can always select and improve your selection processes and not hope for creative outcome and select non-creative individuals. So that's also an intervention that's always possible. But let's focus on things at the individual level, mindsets at the individual level that can be changed because individuals are always embedded in teams, and these teams are embedded in larger organizations. So what you see from research on team and organizational level is that innovation vision is a key driver for innovative mindsets. So if you don't have that, if you don't have an overarching vision that innovation is important, it's very likely that your employees will be rather focused on a prevention, will be in a mindset that's oriented towards avoiding mistakes, avoiding errors, preserving the status quo, securing a job. Then a promotion focus on innovation and being proactive. Very important is this diversity climate, and it's I cannot stress this enough. If you don't have diversity, you have to create diversity in your team. And the question, of course, is how can you create diversity? Well, you can create diversity by also making people realize that it is important to disagree. Disagreement is part of the process. You cannot really have innovation. You cannot really have innovative performance without disagreement. That's part of the deal. But of course, diversity and disagreement are not something that we humans like very much. It's diversity and disagreement is threatening. Why? Your views are challenged, and if your views are challenged, you are challenged, and it's difficult to really come to terms with wishing for diversity, but then having to deal with the negative consequences of having diversity in your organization, diversity in your team. It's not such a trivial task to sort out. What we have from research is that psychological safety, if you manage as a leader to create this sense of psychological safety in your team, then the diversity pays off. Because people then feel free to take risks, feel free to speak up. And if you speak up, you challenge the others, even if the other group members are in a protective mode, in this reactive mode. You can push them to think in a promotion way. You just seek opportunities and develop innovation. So it's quite important to manage your teams properly. And then I cannot stress this enough. Why? Because teams are the engine of innovation in organizations and society nowadays. At the organizational level, I would like to stress slack resources. Very, very often you have situations in which, yes, organizations have that ambition to innovate, but there is no resources, on the table to do so. You have organizations that claim that they want to innovate, but they put so much pressure into on the tasks that people have to accomplish that pushes employees in a prevention focus. So they just have to cope with the workload. They just have to cope with the workload because there is so much to do, so little time, and they just have to cope with it. They have to survive the next day. That's not an innovation mindset. That's not a place in which you want to push your employees. No, contrary, you want to bring them autonomy, to bring them challenging tasks, of course, but then give them the support to think in a proactive fashion about it. Leadership support is quite important, and I believe in the next session Theo will talk more about leadership, which is a separate element. An element is in itself that deserves attention. But also in terms of work design, the way in which you can shift the mindsets from a reactive to a promotion focused and innovation focused mindset is by also shifting this role expectations. What do you expect from your employees? Make it clear that they have to be innovative. And what better way to close my integrative talk through scientific evidence than with a quote from practice. Musk again. Innovation and making mistakes along the way are rewarded, yet failure to try to innovate comes with a big penalty. So that is a reflection that comes from an innovator on what you need to create in an organization beyond vision, beyond a supportive climate. What you need to create in an organization to support that innovation mindset, that promotion focus that will make that mindset be dominant in your organization. And of course, you can always select, and if you want, if you want to stimulate innovation in a particular unit, then you have to select creative individuals, and that's not a trivial task. Why? Because personality and especially this creative potential that individuals have to different degrees, you cannot really manipulate, you cannot really change in time. So I hope I managed to convince you that actually the innovative mindsets that are so important as drivers of individual innovative performance can be changed by operating at the group level and organizational level. And if you really want to focus on innovative behaviors and innovative mindsets, then you cannot really tackle a single level. You need to approach all these layers: individual, group, organization. So thank you. Going back to the picture that illustrates the complexity of the whole debate, and I think we invite Theo to react, right, Peter?
Yeah, thank you very much, Petru. Super insightful. It was a bunch of information, and I had the feeling we could go on for another hour, but yeah, we have to squeeze it in. So we also have to leave something for the next round. But indeed, let's go to Mr. Transition of APG, as he's called in the streets, Theo van Kessel. If you look at this, Theo, all these insights, all this, it's almost like playing an orchestra. You need to push on very, very many different buttons. How do you see that from a business perspective, if you see all these pointers?
I think it is even more hard than Petru is telling. And I want to explain some conflicts I see within the business environment. The first one was it's possible to make mistakes. Failure is an option, and you have to learn fast, fail fast, learn fast. And that's obvious because you are doing new things. You are in an area you have never been, and you can learn very fast. But on the other hand, you have to perform. And if you have to perform, there should be no tolerance for incompetence. And often making failures is an excuse for incompetence of the staff. So I think you should go for the best talents. Don't accept any mediocrity. And if people do bad jobs, you have to take the consequences. So you have to build a culture of competence. That's my first point of view. The second one is the willingness to experiment should be balanced by tough discipline. Because experimenting is the same as making mistakes. You're in a new area, you're doing new things. But without discipline, experimenting is only an excuse. You have to design your processes very clear. You have to know what you want to learn. You have to know when to stop or to adapt anything, because you have to keep the costs very low. And the decisions should be rational and be on data, should be data driven. while experimenting also and making errors sometimes also look like fun. Then the third point is the psychological safety. To be free, to have the freedom, to tell without fear. But on the other hand, you should be brutal honest. And you should handle those brutal honest things, because during the experiments, you will be confronted with other opinions, totally different opinions. You should defend your choices by data and by logic. So respect is for me the solution for this dilemma, but this dilemma. To feel safe, but on the other hand, to be criticized for what you're doing. Collaboration is the fun part, but collaboration is also hard. You work with diverse persons, and for me, diverse, I saw what's the definition of diverse. That's very hard, but I learned from a personal experience that diversity really can help to solve complex problems. If you have a simple problem, people with all the same DNA will solve that problem more fast and even better. And I think the trust word within diverse group is hard, because you have other opinions, so you sometimes don't trust each other. And for me, for a leader, it is very necessary to build a team of diverse people in which people trust each other, in which is the psychological safety. And you should ask for help to persons who can help you best. And mostly the questions you ask for help is not in a functional description. On the other hand, collaboration will not say that there should be consensus. Because in the Netherlands, you see we have consensus, and you see all the shit in the parliament, and that's for a reason. So that you should decide very fast in an innovative process, and there should be ownership for the consequences. And you shouldn't be possible to hide in the group, because if you can hide in the group, you don't add as much as you can. And then my last point is. A flat hierarchy. Too much hierarchy will lose innovation, because you have to adapt very fast to new circumstances. The decision making should take place lower in the organization, at the part where the decision can make the best, and you should have a richer diversity. And that to bring that all together, you need a strong vision, what Petru also told. You go for one goal, and you have to have shared principles. So, as a conclusion, I think it is even more hard than Petru tells, because the nice, innovative things look like fun, look like pleasure, look like we can do what we want. And on the other hand, it should be very understood to come to your goals with tough decisions, tough discussions, and then the safe environment is very needed. So that was in 5 minutes my reflection. So I can hope that we can discuss 15 minutes about the theory and the reflections.
Yeah, awesome reflection to you. It's very interesting also to hear that. What do you think, Petru? Well,
I think Theo has raised critical questions, fundamental questions that I think I took notes, and while taking notes, I thought, these rules could be actually ground rules for innovation in any company. How to fail, how to discipline your process, how to organize for collaboration. But I would like to stop a little bit on the idea that Theo has brought in, the difficulty of collaboration, the difficulty with trust. and bring in some of our research on multi-party collaboration, in which we have investigated about 10 years of case studies and scientific research on what does it mean to collaborate between different organizations that come together to solve complex problems. And one of the fundamental things that we discovered in that study was that you cannot talk about collaboration, about effective collaboration, without cognitive conflict. People have to disagree. And sometimes consensus is just not possible. But if consensus is not possible, that's scary for people, because that disturbs the harmony in interpersonal relations. And we want harmony. We feel good when we agree. And very often what happens in these attempts, diversity is suppressed, and people start with the false assumption we all agree, we are all on the same page. And when in time they realize they cannot be successful in innovating, in solving the problem, simply because they have disregarded the differences, simply because they disregarded the complexity, then the bomb explodes, and the relationships are worsened, and the collaboration is not possible anymore. And of course, another element that Theo mentioned is trust. We often talk about trust as a given, and we say, we have to trust each other. Yeah, but it's easy to say, because very often, especially when you meet someone new, the natural state of beginning for that relationship is not trust, is actually distrust, and trust has to be built. And that question, how do you build trust? That's not a trivial question. That's not a trivial question. And that's fundamental for our way of working with diversity and making collaboration happen. So yes, collaboration requires diversity. Yes, collaboration involves conflict. You cannot talk about collaboration without disagreement. And trust as a mechanism that binds everything together is not a given.
Thank you. And what about APG is a pretty international company. We have more international companies in the audience. I worked myself a while in China, Shanghai. They have a different feeling about agreement than we in the Netherlands. How do you see these differences? Cultural.
Theo, or?
Yeah, you should take care of the cultural differences. In the Netherlands, we are used to speak freely and to say no to your boss. When you're in Asia, that's more hard to do. So if they say maybe it is no, or I don't know, and sometimes that's a failure. So I think you should be interested in the cultural differences. You should learn about that, and you should take care for that. And you can only do by practicing. You cannot only learn by theory and do it okay. I made hundreds of mistakes. If you see in the Netherlands, the word negotiate isn't very hard, but if you say that in the US, people think you are a racist, and then your trust is already broken. So you should take care, and you should invite the other people, because it is not only adapting from your side, it's also adapting from the other side. So you should invite each other to know each other and to respect the cultural differences, but also talk about those differences.
I think Theo makes a very important point here, especially because these things you cannot learn from books. I mean, yes, you'll be aware that there are differences, but really the way of dealing with diversity you understand by interacting with people. And I think this is a fundamental element that we need to kind of set straight. And we had this study on cross-cultural differences on the intention to disagree with others. So we told people simply in the Netherlands, for example, you are part of the group, and suddenly the group seems to agree that you have to go that way, but you have data and you know that is a wrong way to go, and then what do? Do you confront the group? Do you disagree with the group or not? And we asked exactly the same question in China. And then we measured the creativity of these groups. And we had an objective indicator of creativity. Now, what we found is that the intention to disagree is certainly higher in the Netherlands. So they will disagree openly, not in China. But the open disagreement drove creativity only in the Western cultures, not in the Eastern culture. That doesn't mean that groups were less creative. No, the mechanisms through which they came up with the creative solution were just different. And you cannot learn those things from books. And it's just the experience with others and in engagement with others that will teach you that set of competencies. And this is, for example, also related to collaboration. Collaboration is not something that you can learn from books. It doesn't come with a recipe for success. You cannot read a book with 10 guidelines for success to become more collaborative. No, you have to experience it. You have to reflect on it. You have to sit in the difficulty of engaging with different others that are not sharing your ideas, and maybe they will never will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and what I also recognize is that on the one hand you need diverse teams, but on the other hand that will introduce another level of complexity in building trust, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think also what you need in there is some time to build that trust in those teams and build that diversity. And that goes a little bit into another question that was in the chat of Idar about slack or lack of resources. Because I think you will need a lot of time, so resource. And his question was explicitly, how do you look into the cost efficiency that is thriving in a lot of companies, and if that hinders the innovative performance of these companies?
From a personal point of view, I think if you have shortages, whether the shortage is money or the shortage is power or something else, that is a possibility to be more creative, and you will be more creative. If you have lots of money, you also will be fed. If you have lots of food, you will eat very much. So despite when you have the right mindset, if you have the right mindsets, you can use the money for the good things, and you can use the food for the good things. But I think shortages improves creativity.
What do you say, Petru?
Well, I think they force you into a way of thinking and acting that requires innovation. There is just no way out for you. The trouble with that is that when people are threatened, they naturally go into a defensive mode. And I see a conflict there between the need to change, because there is simply no other way, and the tendency to protect yourself, because that's what comes naturally to you. And I think that is a difficult riddle to solve. You know, I fully understand the position that necessity drives innovation, and sometimes when you're in dire straits, you have to change things. There's no other way. But on the other hand, I think that comes with a huge price. If you look simply from a scientific perspective, people in negative moods, so when they experience negative emotions, they tend to focus on solving problems, while if they experience positive emotions, those positive emotions, they trigger what we call flexibility, cognitive flexibility, and that is actually one of the drivers of creative thinking. So these two things come again with a paradox. You will sort out things better when your brain signals you, well, you have a problem, you better change. And then research shows that the depth of information processing, how well we'll tackle a problem, is better in those negative emotional constellations. But the thing is, research also shows that positive emotions trigger flexible thinking, which is essential for creativity. So you have two different processes that you have to manage at the individual level here.
Thank you, Petru, and thank you, Theo, for all these insights. We have some other questions in the chat, but unfortunately, I see that we're running out of time here. So we will definitely make sure that the question of Liana and Paul in the chat will be taken into account for next time. Just for you in the audience, we have June 3rd. We have the next event. Will be 10 o'clock in the morning again. Over there, we will turn it around. So Theo will start with a presentation on leadership and how important it is in building a creative and innovative company. And then afterwards, Petru will share his reflections from an academic point of view on the presentation that Theo shared. And of course, we will again go into an interaction with you guys, because we really want to make this as interactive as possible. That's also why we call it a dialogue. Having said that, I want to thank you very much for coming this morning, but I especially want to thank Petru and Theo for freeing up some time in their super busy agendas and to come together here and explain their vision on creative and innovative companies. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and for everyone in the audience. Thanks again, and hope to see you soon, at least at the 3rd of June. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.